Let me ask you something. Is it really worth it to chase money at all costs? Is there any amount of wealth that is worth exchanging your soul for? And most importantly, have you ever wondered why the devil never gives without taking something in return? Many have sought riches by any means necessary, willing to pay any price. But what happens when the price is higher than they ever imagined? What happens when the thing they must sacrifice is not gold, not silver, not livestock or land, but the very people they hold dear? Tonight, I bring you a chilling tale, a tale of one man who entered the forbidden forest of wickedness in search of wealth beyond imagination. He thought he was ready to do anything, but he did not know that the ultimate test was waiting for him. He was given a choice, one so cruel, so unthinkable, that even the hardest of hearts would tremble. Only one must be chosen, and only with that sacrifice would he receive all the wealth he desired. Prepare yourself. This is not just a story. This is a warning. Now let us begin. But before we continue, please like and subscribe. What would you do for money? How far would you go to escape poverty? Would you give up your morals, your conscience, even your soul, just to taste wealth? Some say money is power. Some say money answers all things. But here's the real question. When the devil stretches his hand and offers you gold, have you ever asked what he will take in return? Because make no mistake, he never gives without collecting something far more precious. Tonight, you will hear a story that will shake you to your core. A story of greed, desperation, and a choice so dark, so terrifying, that most would rather remain poor than face it. A man, an ordinary man just like you and me, decided that he had suffered enough. Poverty had mocked him for too long. Hunger had tormented him. The world had treated him like dirt. So he made a decision. He would find wealth at any cost. And in his search, he entered the forbidden forest of wickedness, a place where only the desperate go. A place where riches flow like rivers, but every drop is paid for in blood. When he arrived, he thought he was ready. He thought he could handle anything. But he was not prepared for what awaited him. A voice, deep, ancient, merciless, spoke from the shadows. You seek wealth? Then choose. One must die for you to rise. Your father, the man who gave you life. Your mother, the woman who carried you. Your wife, the one who stood beside you. Or your son, your own flesh and blood. 4 people. One must go. Tell me, if you were in his shoes, could you decide? Could you look into the eyes of someone you love, knowing that in seconds, they would be gone forever, just so you could drive the finest cars, live in mansions and command respect? This is not just a story. It is a mirror reflecting the greed of mankind, the price of desperation, and the horrifying reality of those who seek wealth at any cost. In the semi-urban town of Odaju, where the old ways still whispered in the wind and modern life fought to take root, there lived a man named Kola Adekola. Kola was 35 years old, a man who had spent his entire life struggling, working long hours, chasing opportunities, yet never breaking free from the grip of poverty. He was a man of many dreams but little fortune. His small electronics shop barely made enough to support his family. His father, Babasola, 58 years old, once a strong, hard-working farmer, now sat weak and frail in their old family house. His mother, Mama Teyo, 53 years old, the backbone of the household, still sold roasted corn by the roadside, despite her aging bones. His wife, Kemi, 32 years old, had stood by him through thick and thin, sacrificing her own ambitions for their home. And then there was Dare, their 8-year-old son, the light of their lives, full of hope, full of promise. Kola had tried everything, legal businesses, small investments, even traveling to Lagos for better opportunities, but life kept pulling him back like a heavy chain. His desperation grew with every passing day. He watched men he once called friends rise overnight, buying cars, building houses, and throwing lavish parties. Rumors spread through Odaju about a secret path to wealth. A path only the truly desperate dared to follow. A path that led deep into the forest of wickedness, where ancient spirits and unseen forces granted wealth, but at a terrible cost. At first, Kola dismissed the whispers. But one night, after a long day of failure, something inside him snapped. He could no longer bear the shame, the struggle, the endless cycle of poverty. And so, with a heart full of desperation and fear, he made the choice that would change his life forever. He would enter the forest of wickedness. He would seek wealth. But he did not know that the forest was waiting for him, and it would demand a sacrifice. Kola Adekola was born into hardship, not just the everyday struggles of the poor, but a life so steeped in suffering that even his arrival into the world was a battle. He was a premature baby, frail and weak, born outside wedlock to a man who had nothing, not even the decency to stay. His father, a wretched, poverty-stricken young man, had whispered empty promises to his mother, but when the reality of responsibility came, he vanished. The very day Kola was born, his father disappeared, leaving his mother alone with a fragile child and a hospital bill she could not pay. The nurses, pitying the young woman, allowed her to stay for a while. But pity had limits. When it was time to discharge her, she had no money. The hospital insisted, no payment, no discharge. Helpless, she sat in the hospital bed, cradling her newborn son, praying for a miracle. And then the miracle came. A woman, a fellow patient in the maternity ward, watched her in silence for days. She had seen the sadness in the young mother's eyes, the way she clutched her baby as though holding him tighter would make the world kinder. On the day the hospital demanded payment, the woman stepped forward and cleared the bills. No mother should be punished for bringing life into the world, she had said simply before walking away. And so, with nothing but a thin wrapper to cover the newborn and a grateful heart for the stranger's kindness, Kola's mother left the hospital. But the struggles were far from over. When the time came for his christening, there was no grand celebration, no joyful family gathering. His grandmother, Abony, had to take him to a nearby church in the early hours of the morning, just as an all-night vigil had ended. The church was emptying, members already heading home. By the time the small, frail woman stepped into the church hall, only 3 church workers and a single sister remained. 7 people in total. There was no ordained pastor to perform the naming ceremony. One of the brothers, seeing their distress, stepped forward. That morning, he became the pastor. In less than 10 minutes, the ceremony was over. No choir, no feasting, no family elders speaking prayers over the child. Only the cold air of the near-empty church and the quiet voices of a handful of strangers witnessing the beginning of a life already marked by struggle. This was how Kola Adekola entered the world. With nothing. Perhaps this was why, 35 years later, when he stood at the edge of the forest of wickedness, he felt no fear, only the burning desire to escape the curse of poverty. He had been born into nothingness. He had suffered enough. And if wealth demanded a sacrifice, so be it. For the first 2 years of his life, Kola Adekola grew up without a father. His mother did her best, raising him alone with the little she had. But poverty does not have patience, and soon, even her family saw mother and son as an unbearable weight. They had little to sustain themselves, and an extra mouth to feed, especially a child born from disgrace, only deepened their suffering. And so, when Kola turned 2 years old, something unexpected happened. His father returned. But not out of love. Not out of guilt. Not because he wanted to undo his wrongs or give his wife and child a better life. He came because he had no choice. No woman wanted him. The few women he pursued turned him away, knowing he had abandoned his own blood. His reputation as an irresponsible man followed him like a curse. His friends laughed at him behind his back. Some mocked him openly, calling him a disgrace. One of them even sneered at him in a drunken argument and said, "If you don't want your wife, I'll take her. At least she's better than nothing." That was the final straw. Kola's father, swallowing the shame like bitter medicine, went to collect his family. Please subscribe. There was no apology, no remorse, no attempt to make amends. He came because he had no better option, because even his wife's family, desperate to rid themselves of an extra burden, had been sending people to beg him to come and take what belongs to you. And so, on a hot afternoon, he walked into the small room where Kola and his mother stayed, looking at them as though they were mere objects, things to be claimed, not cherished. "Pack your things. Let's go." His mother, knowing she had no other choice, obeyed. That was how Kola entered a home where he was never truly wanted. Kola grew up feeling the weight of his father's resentment. The man never hit him, never outright mistreated him, but his absence was louder than words, and his indifference was a wound that never healed. Every meal felt like charity. Every new pair of clothes felt undeserved. Every moment of kindness from his father's side was given begrudgingly, as though Kola had stolen it. His mother tried to shield him from the coldness, But even her love could not erase the truth. Kola was never supposed to be here. Perhaps this was why, 33 years later, when he found himself staring at the forest of wickedness, he did not hesitate. He had spent his whole life being unwanted, unvalued, unloved. Now he would force the world to respect him, even if it meant making the ultimate sacrifice. Kola Adekola had always known poverty. Not the kind that came in waves, where some days were better than others. Not the kind that allowed for small luxuries, where a struggling family could still afford moments of joy. No, his was the kind of poverty that never left, the kind that swallowed dreams whole and left only desperation behind. The stories his mother had told him about his infancy the day his father abandoned them, the woman who paid their hospital bills, the pitiful naming ceremony with just 7 people, had always sounded like tales from another life. He had heard them, yes, but he never truly felt them. Until now. Now, standing on the edge of the forest of wickedness, about to make a decision that would change his life forever, the weight of those stories sank into him like a stone in deep water. Because those were not just stories. They were his life. And the proof was in his own childhood. Kola was 6 years old when he was first registered at a public primary school. His parents had waited until then, not because they had planned for him to start school late, but because even the smallest financial obligations felt like mountains they could not climb. And so, when he finally walked through the gates of the school, he did so in a tattered, oversized uniform, the fabric already weakened from years of wear by another child before him. He had no sandals, no school bag, no textbooks, no food. At break time, while his classmates opened their lunchboxes or bought snacks from the school vendor, Kola could only sit quietly, pretending he wasn't hungry. But hunger could not be hidden for long. And so, when the hunger became unbearable, he swallowed his pride and begged for food. Sometimes a kind classmate would share. Other times, they laughed at him. "You don't have food again today, Kola? Didn't your parents give you money? Why don't you just tell them to cook something nice for you?" He never answered. Because what could he say? That his parents ate just to survive? That every meal was a struggle? That his mother, Mama Teo, woke up at dawn to prepare whatever she could afford before leaving for the market, and that was the only thing he had to eat until she returned in the evening? Or that his father, Baba Sola, never spoke about food beyond its necessity for survival? There were only 2 times in Kola's childhood when he could remember eating well: Christmas and Muslim holidays. Those were the days when neighbors shared food, when big pots of rice and stews were prepared, when meats were distributed generously. Those were the only days Kola could recall the taste of proper jollof rice, fried meat, and rich soup with assorted ingredients. Beyond that, nothing. Even though his father claimed to be a Christian, he had never seen the man slaughter a chicken for any celebration. Not on birthdays. Not on Easter. Not on New Year's Day. Not even once. For some people, poverty was a phase, a moment of struggle before life improved. Please subscribe. But for Kola's family, poverty was their existence. It was in the cracked walls of their home, in the empty plates on their table, in the whispered conversations between his parents about what to eat the next day. It was absolute. Better imagined than experienced. And that was why now, as a 35-year-old man, standing at the entrance of the forest of wickedness, he felt no fear. Because he had already lived the worst life could offer. He had nothing to lose. And if all it took to escape this curse of poverty was a sacrifice, then so be it. If there was one thing that separated Kola from the rest of his poor peers, it was his mind. From primary 1 to primary 6, there was never a time he came second in his class. He was always number 1. Always the brightest. Always the child teachers pointed to when they wanted to show an example of intelligence and discipline. It wasn't just that he was smart, it was that he had nothing else but his brilliance. No money. No fine clothes. No rich parents. Nothing. But he had his brain. And so, while others had options, Kola knew that his only way out of poverty was through education. When it was time for secondary school, Kola should have stayed home. His parents had no money for school fees, no money for books, no money for anything. But luck or perhaps fate intervened. The government of his state had declared free education for all students, covering tuition fees for public secondary schools. Without this opportunity, Kola's academic journey would have ended at primary school, just like many others in his neighborhood. But with free education, he stepped into secondary school, determined to make the most of it. And just like before, he excelled. Through thick and thin, he studied harder than anyone else, knowing that his brilliance was his only hope. When it was time for the joint university admission examination, Kola sat for it like every other hopeful student. But he didn't just pass, he shattered expectations. His scores were so high that he not only gained admission into university without stress, but he also won a scholarship. In addition to the government's educational grants, this scholarship became his ladder out of the pit of poverty. It was the reason he was able to wade through his university years without dropping out. The reason he could dream. The reason he believed, for a while, that he might escape the life of suffering he had always known. But life had other plans. Because even after all his academic achievements, even after all the years of struggling and succeeding against all odds, poverty still would not let him go. And now, he stood at the entrance of the forest of wickedness, ready to make the one choice that would determine his fate forever. Please subscribe and like. Kola Adekola had a plan. He had spent years in unbearable poverty, and he was determined to break free. That was why, when he got to university, he chose estate management. Not medicine, not law, not engineering. Estate management. Because, in his mind, real estate was the surest way to become rich and stay rich. He wasn't interested in chasing jobs that would keep him stuck in an office, earning just enough to survive. He wanted wealth, the kind that would make up for all the years of suffering, the kind that would ensure poverty never found him again. So, when he completed his degree, his lecturers encouraged him to return for a master's degree in engineering, believing that someone as brilliant as him could do more. But he refused. "Let me go into the real world first," he told them. "I'll make my money, then I'll come back for further studies." He rejected every scholarship offer. His mind was set. He was going to build an empire. He was going to become a real estate mogul. He was going to escape poverty forever. But life had other plans. 3 years after graduation, Kola was still struggling. His real estate prospects looked promising, but every penny he made seemed to vanish into thin air. Deals that should have brought him huge profits somehow collapsed at the last minute. Every new business venture felt as though it was being blown away by a mysterious wind. He would work hard, put in all his effort, and yet nothing tangible remained. It was as if something, some unseen force, was making sure he never rose above his poverty. Betrayed and abandoned. As if the financial struggles weren't enough, Kola also suffered heartbreak after heartbreak. He had dated several women, hoping to build a life with someone who truly cared for him. But one by one, they left him. At first, they were sweet and loving. But the moment they realized he couldn't afford to spoil them with luxury, they grew cold. They insulted him, called him a broke man, and made funny excuses to dump him. Some claimed they needed a man who could take care of them. Some said they couldn't wait for him to figure out his life. Some simply stopped picking his calls. It was as though the world was laughing at his suffering. Just when it seemed like he had nothing left, he met Funmilayo. She was different. She wasn't just beautiful, she was understanding, hard-working, and faithful. She came from a humble background and understood what it meant to struggle. She was gifted, intelligent, and driven. But most importantly, she was godly. While other women chased after rich men, Funmilayo saw Kola's potential. She saw his heart, his resilience, his intelligence. She didn't demand luxury. She didn't mock his struggles. Instead, she chose him. And when he asked her to marry him, she gave him an answer that melted his soul. For better, for worse, I am with you. Kola Adekola was not a religious man. He never had been. Like his father, he saw no need for church or spiritual matters. To him, religion was for two types of people. 1. The extremely rich, who went to church for prestige and power. 2. The extremely poor, who clung to religion because they had no other hope. He was neither. At least, not yet. He refused to be part of religion's liabilities, those who depended on miracles to eat, to pay rent, to survive. When I become an asset, when I have money, then maybe I'll consider religion, he always said. Even during his university days, he never cared much for church. His roommates often dragged him to fellowship, but he only went on special occasions, weddings, birthdays, or Thanksgiving services. Not for the message, not for the prayers, but for the food. After graduation, He completely detached from church life. He had no pastor, no denomination, no spiritual guide. Then came the day that changed everything. The day his wife gave birth to their first son. Out of respect for her faith, he followed her to her church to get permission from the pastor to christen the child. It was supposed to be a simple visit: go in, speak to the pastor, and leave. But something unexpected happened. As the pastor led the congregation in prayer, he said something that shook Kola to his core. Break every generational curse upon your life and upon the life of your children. And in that moment, Kola saw himself clearly. He saw his own life mirroring his father's. His father had abandoned him at birth. He had struggled through a childhood of poverty and shame. Even after all his education, he was still broke, frustrated, and failing. Now he had a son of his own. Would Dare grow up and suffer the same fate? Would his child also struggle, beg, and fight just to survive? For the first time, fear gripped his soul. For the first time, he began to wonder if there was something beyond what the eyes could see, a force, a power, a curse, something that had been working against him all along. And for the first time in his life, Kola Adekola truly prayed. Please subscribe. Ever since that day in church, Kola had been restless. The words of the pastor haunted him. Break every generational curse upon your life and upon the life of your children. It was like a seed had been planted in his soul, and no matter how much he tried to ignore it, it kept growing. Could it be true? Was there something working against him all along? Or was it just another religious gimmick? Seeking answers, finding confusion. Kola was not a man to accept things blindly. If there were supernatural forces, he needed proof. And so, he began to ask subtle questions. Not too obvious, just enough to gauge the opinions of the people around him. Some of his loyal friends and comrades gave him divergent views. Some laughed at his curiosity. Kola, you of all people? You want to start carrying a Bible now? Others took the opportunity to evangelize him. My brother, the only power that is real is Jesus Christ. He can set you free. But the loudest voices were not those calling him to God. They were the ones luring him toward the devil. Omo, forget that church talk. You see people like Lakesu? Do you think money falls from the sky? Kola, all these billionaires you admire, do you think they got rich just by hard work? Open your eyes, my guy. Some tried to initiate him into their secret societies. Join us, and your life will change forever. No more suffering. You want money, don't you? Why struggle when there's an easier way? And the worst part? They made sense. For every sermon he heard about patience and faith, there were 10 counterarguments about power and immediate wealth. For every verse quoted about blessings, there was a testimony of a man who had gone to take power, and now owned estates in Lagos and Abuja. Kola found himself trapped in a whirlwind of voices. The more he searched for answers, the more confused he became. It was in this state of turmoil that Kola received an exclusive invitation. Lakesu, the mysteriously rich man. The man who had pulled him out of financial ruin more times than he could count. The man who had sponsored his wedding. The man who had paid for his son's naming ceremony. Lakesu was not just a friend. He was a destiny helper. And now, he was celebrating the launch of his latest company with a grand gala night. Kola couldn't refuse the invitation. It was a night of glitz and glamour. Expensive suits, flashing lights, top politicians, celebrities, business moguls. Kola felt like a stranger in their midst. Please subscribe. But Lakesu? Lakesu belonged. He was effortlessly powerful, moving through the crowd like a king among his subjects. Later that evening, after the champagne had flowed and the music had softened, Lakesu called Kola aside. Lakesu placed a firm hand on Kola's shoulder and chuckled. Kola, my boy, you've struggled long enough, haven't you? Kola swallowed hard. Lakesu's grip was strong, too strong, as if he wasn't just holding his shoulder but pressing down on his very soul. You see all of this? Lakesu gestured toward the luxurious ballroom, the million-naira chandeliers, the powerful men laughing with glasses of wine in their hands. It's not that hard to get, Kola. People like us? We don't wait for fate. We take it. Kola could feel the weight of those words. If you want this kind of life, it's pretty available for a token. If your answer is yes, meet me at this hotel tomorrow by 9 p.m. Then, without another word, Lakesu walked away, leaving Kola standing there, frozen in time. For the rest of the night, he couldn't think straight. A token? What kind of token? The next evening, Kola found himself in front of a 5-star hotel in Odaju. The words of Lakesu echoed in his mind. If you want this kind of life, meet me at this hotel by 9 p.m. He told himself he was just going out of curiosity. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't going to do anything crazy. But deep down, he knew the truth. He needed answers. At exactly 9 p.m., he walked into the luxurious penthouse suite where Lakesu was waiting. No unnecessary greetings. No small talk. Just a direct question. Kola, how far are you willing to go for wealth? Kola hesitated. What do you mean? Lakesu leaned back, swirling a glass of wine in his hand. I mean, are you ready to make the sacrifice required to unlock your destiny? Something in Kola's stomach turned. Sacrifice. Lakesu smiled. Yes, my boy. A little price for a great reward. You see, wealth doesn't come by accident. It's given. And in this world, there are those who take and those who wait. You've waited long enough. Kola felt his throat go dry. What kind of price? Lakesu's smile faded. He reached into his pocket and brought out a small black envelope. Inside this envelope are 4 names. Kola's hands trembled as he took it and opened it. And when he saw the names, his blood ran cold. Baba Sola, his father. Mama Teyo, his mother. Funmilayo, his wife. Ditini, his 8-year-old son. Please subscribe. Kola shot to his feet. What is this? Lakesu's expression remained calm. You are to choose one. Kola's heart pounded against his chest. Choose one. Yes. One life in exchange for wealth beyond your imagination. This is your moment, Kola. The moment that separates the weak from the strong. The great from the forgotten. Kola felt like the walls of the room were closing in. His father, the man who had abandoned him as a baby, the man who had only taken him back because of shame. His mother, the woman who had suffered so much for him, who had endured the shame of his father's absence, who had struggled to put food on his plate. His wife, the only woman who had loved him despite his failures, who had stood by him when all others walked away. His son, his own flesh and blood, the little boy who looked up to him with innocent eyes, who called him daddy with pure trust. Kola's hands shook as he dropped the envelope on the table. I can't. Lakesu sighed and picked up the envelope. You can't? Or you won't? Both. Lakesu studied him for a long time. Then he leaned forward. You think this is the first time a man has faced this decision? Do you think the rich men you admire didn't make their choices? Kola's lips trembled. There has to be another way. Lakesu chuckled. There isn't. Poverty is a disease, Kola. And this is the cure. But if you want to keep struggling for crumbs, be my guest. Kola stood up abruptly. His mind was spinning. He had come looking for wealth. But he had found a nightmare. His father. His mother. His wife. His son. 4 names. 4 lives. And he was supposed to kill one? No. He couldn't do it. He turned and stormed out of the hotel room, heart pounding, mind racing. Kola never spoke to Lakesu again. But from that night, things changed. Everything he touched crumbled. Every opportunity slipped through his fingers. It was as if an invisible force was working against him. And in the darkest corners of his nightmares, he could still hear Lakesu's voice. There isn't another way, Kola. Everywhere he turned, he saw the price of his decision. The question was no longer, how far would you go for wealth? It was, how long can you survive without it? Kola's mind became a battlefield of thoughts, doubts, and restless curiosity. Every day, he found himself staring at wealthy men differently, examining their faces, watching their movements, and wondering what kind of token they had given up for their fortune. Did they sacrifice their wives? Their children? Their parents? Their siblings? Or maybe, just maybe, they donated a neighbor, a friend, a business partner? His paranoia grew. Each time he walked past a mansion or saw someone driving a luxury car, his stomach twisted. What did you give up? The question echoed in his head. At home, his wife Funmilayo noticed the change. He was losing weight. His appetite had dwindled. He fell sick intermittently, yet doctors could find nothing wrong. At night, he tossed and turned, waking up drenched in sweat from nightmares he couldn't explain. One evening, as they sat on their old creaky couch, the flickering light bulb casting eerie shadows on the wall, Kola suddenly blurted out, "My dear, do you know that the bottom of riches is dirty? The foundation of riches is dirty." Funmilayo, used to his recent strange outbursts, sighed and turned to him. "Why do you think so?" she asked. Kola ran a hand over his face. "Because if it wasn't dirty, then tell me, why is wealth so difficult to attain? Why is it that we work hard, yet we remain stagnant? Why do those who cut corners seem to rise faster than those who play by the rules?" Funmilayo shook her head. "Not all rich men are diabolical, Kola. Making money is easy. It just requires focus, hard work, consistency, passion, and patience." Kola sat up abruptly. "Which of these virtues do you and I lack?" She hesitated, then answered softly, "None." Kola exhaled sharply, his hands tightening into fists. "So why then are we not rich?" Funmilayo smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "I forgot to add one thing, my love, God's time." Kola frowned. "We have all it takes to be rich," she continued, "but just like when I was pregnant with Detini, I had to wait for 9 months, whether I liked it or not. Except I wanted a premature baby." Her words hit him like a slap. He stared at her, speechless. She always won these debates. Please subscribe.